What is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over the most important mechanics for console Fortnite players, and here's what I mean by that. Obviously in Fortnite, there are a ton of different mechanical techniques that you can learn, practice, and then hopefully use in games. However, not all of these techniques are of equal importance at the end of the day. And if you're someone that's trying to improve mechanically, or honestly just improve in general, it's probably a good idea to know which techniques you should focus on learning and improving the most. Plus, I think the importance of certain mechanical techniques is very different on console compared to PC. So in this video, we're going to be ranking the following: tunneling, ramp rushes, high ground retakes, 1v1 starts, 90s, and phasing techniques from least important to most important, and also explaining why in each section. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so out of the 6 techniques I just named, I think by far the least important on this list are ramp rushes. It's kind of funny because if you're an OG Fortnite player, you may remember that back in the first 3 to 4 seasons or so, ramp rushes were probably the #1 most important mechanical technique to use. People thought that if you could do these super advanced ramp rushes, you would never be able to die in fights and always be able to get high ground, and it got to the point where there was like a new crazy advanced ramp rush being created and shared on what seemed like a daily basis. But eventually over time, people started to realize that those flashy ramp rushes barely did more to help you than the basic ones, and more importantly, they just burn through mats ridiculously quickly, which is a big problem. So when it comes to learning ramp rushes, you really only need to know the 2 to 3 most basic and fundamental ones. Single floor ramp wall should be the ramp rush that you probably use the most. Single ramp wall is solid when you really want to save mats. Double floor ramp wall is also good situationally, and there's maybe 1 to 2 other more niche ones that you could learn, but I really wouldn't consider necessary by any means. So even though ramp rushes are the least important mechanic, they're obviously still something you use a lot, but it's one of those things where you either know how to do them or you don't, so once you learn them, there's really no need to put any additional practice time into them, if that makes sense. The second least important mechanical technique for console players are 1v1 starts. The truth is, the majority of fights that you're going to get into in a regular Battle Royale game, they're just not going to be these clean 1v1s. Seriously, what percentage of fights do you think you get into where you and the enemy both see each other at the same time, you're both on the same level of elevation, you're in an open area, you aren't too close to each other or too far away, etc, etc. I would guess not very many at all. So because of that, you just don't really have the chance to use these carefully planned out 1v1 starts all that frequently. Don't get me wrong, they're still definitely really good to know because you are going to get into fairly clean 1v1s at least once or twice a game on average, but it's not like a creative mode 1v1 where your start literally makes or breaks the entire fight. So I'd recommend that if you don't know any 1v1 starts, you definitely want to learn at least 1 or 2 reliable ones, but there's no need to learn 10 different super advanced ones unless you play a ton of creative 1v1s. The next most important mechanical technique for console players are phasing techniques. Now I really debated back and forth on this one a bit, and I still think I might be putting it a bit too low, but here's my explanation. Phasing techniques, especially for console players, are undoubtedly very important, and you plain and simple need to know how to consistently phase into a 1x1. Slow editing fights favor PC players so much, and console players have such a huge advantage in point-blank range spray fights, so psychoing into an enemy's 1x1 is a great way to take advantage of that. However, the reason why I don't have it any higher is because it really isn't important to practice phasing techniques because most of them are really simple. Sure, there's some of them that require a bit of setup that you may want to practice once or twice before actually trying it in a game, but the basic and incredibly effective ones like the jump pickaxe or jump while shooting phases are really easy to execute, so much so I have a feeling that some people don't even consider phasing a mechanical technique, and honestly I can totally see where they're coming from. So much like with ramp rushing, even though phasing is crucial, especially on console, you don't really need to practice it much. Moving on to our third most important mechanical technique, we have 90s. No matter how much the Fortnite meta changes, high ground is always going to be an advantageous position to have. Because of that, being able to go from low ground to high ground as fast as possible while also being sufficiently protected is so important. If you can't complete your 90s faster than the opponent you're fighting, he's going to get to high ground first and block you off, which forces you into a bad situation. The interesting thing about 90s is that for a technique that seems so simple on the surface, there are actually a good amount of unique type of 90s that players use. Now sure, a lot of them are more about being flashy than being effective, but I personally use at least 3 or 4 different types of 90s depending on the situation. Regular 90s, no wall 90s, infinite 90s, those all have a specific scenario where they're going to be the most optimal type of 90 to use. So you can debate whether or not 90s get too much attention or if people care too much about doing them fast, but nobody's going to deny that they're very important. At the number 2 spot for most important mechanical techniques on console, we have tunneling. First off, tunneling is so important in a bunch of different situations. People always think of it as this thing that players only use when they're rotating in late game zones, but that really couldn't be any further from the truth. You can use tunneling anytime you want to be protected while going from point A to point B. That could be to disengage from a fight, safely get loot on the ground, reposition to a new location. There's so many situations where tunneling is a really beneficial mechanic to use. And unlike a lot of the other mechanics on this list so far, tunneling actually does take pretty constant practice to do quickly and effectively. Not only are there like 5 to 6 different types of tunnels commonly used by top players, but if you just try to tunnel in the middle of a chaotic situation without practicing first, odds are it's gonna go really poorly. So in competitive, I think you can make a very strong argument that tunneling should literally be number 1 just because of how important it is for late game rotations. But even in regular matches where that scenario doesn't even really happen, it's still no lower than number 2 in my opinion. And finally, the number 1 most important mechanic for console Fortnite is Highground Retakes. Now let me make one thing very clear here. When I say this, I don't mean the super crazy triple reverse cone jump retakes. Those are way more about flashiness than anything, and you definitely don't want to be using those in real games. But basic high ground retakes, on the other hand, are used in the majority of fights you get into, and they're even more important for console players, and here's why. Controller and console specifically is very weak when it comes to the defensive end of box fighting, so if you're good with high ground retakes, you can consistently gain the position of high ground in fights. That means that your opponent either needs to try retakes against you, which you'll hopefully be able to stop, or they're more likely gonna box up. That's good news because since you want high ground, you get to drop down and start the box fight on the offensive end. This allows you to really control the fight and possibly use a phasing technique, which is something that we covered earlier. If you don't know any high ground retakes, or if yours are just really inefficient and you mess up a lot, you're going to be forced to box up and play the defensive end of a box fight really frequently, and on console, that's a very disadvantageous position that you want to avoid as much as possible. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. Of the ones that we discussed, which mechanical technique do you believe is the most important in Fortnite? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.